wake up and win. Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hey, y'all. Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Hey, hey, hey. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our morning show, our morning programming. I'm glad to have you on with us this morning. What's up, everybody? Good morning, good morning, good morning. As you all come on in, you know we love getting heart love. Hey, to all my Facebook livers, y'all know to give us heart love. Everyone watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, like, share, subscribe. Good morning. Hey, 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 Stacy. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Glad to be on with everybody this morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hey, hey, hey. So, listen, everyone, this week we are talking about taking bold action. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We're talking about taking bold action. And super excited that you all are on with us this morning. Hey, Stacy. Hey, Yvette. Hey, hey, hey. Good morning, good morning, good morning. As you all come on in, tap, tap, heart, love, share out with your followers. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. So, this week we are talking all about, excuse my voice, so we are not going to be on long because my voice is shot. Preached very well yesterday. This message was great yesterday, but my voice is shot. So yes, this morning we are talking about taking bold action. We have been talking about the bold believer and praying bold, and now this week we're talking about taking bold action. This week we're talking about taking bold action. That bold believers not only think bold, pray boldly, but then they act boldly, right? And all of the bold action comes out of bold thinking, bold prayers that lead to bold action. Come on, teach. Absolutely. Bold thinking, as a bold believer, I have bold thinking that's rooted in bold prayer that leads to bold action. All right, y'all get the formula. As a believer, bold believer, I my thinking is bold. My prayers, which is rooted in bold prayers, that leads to bold action. And so we shared last week when we were talking about the bold believer, about the woman with the issue of blood and how she thought boldly, spoke boldly, and then we didn't get into it, but this morning we're going to get into it, how she took bold action. And her bold action is what led to her turnaround. So, absolutely, bold thinking rooted in bold prayers leads to bold action, right? And so we're going to lift up the woman with the issue of blood. And if any of you are familiar with her story, and we're just going to talk simply about the what the the anatomy of bold action is what I'm looking for. The anatomy of bold action. Like bold action, yes, bold believers have bold thinking, rooted in bold prayers, that leads to bold action. And so this morning we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy of bold action. Like what does bold action actually look like, right? The anatomy of bold action. Okay? So when you think about anatomy, you think about the body or the makeup, right? Like our anatomy, our buildup, our makeup, right? So when we talk about bold action, the anatomy of bold action, there was a book out years ago about the anatomy of a dead church. And so it lifted up the 7 things that let you know a church is dying, right? And then there's the anatomy where we study the body, what makes up the human body. So we talk about the anatomy of bold action, what makes up bold action. Okay? So number one, you know we always got number ones, twos, and threes, right? Number one, the anatomy of bold action, if we were to examine bold action, what does bold action look like? What makes up bold action? Here's number one. Number one, it goes against the norm. I was going to say the grain, but that's a language that everybody may not understand. So I'm going to say it goes against the norm, right? Bold action goes against the norm, right? It is not something that people are normally doing. Bold action goes against the norm. When you think about the one with the issue of blood, there were hundreds of people around Jesus, and we know this because she has to reach between the crowd to even touch the hem of his garment, right? So, and we've said this before, like everybody was around him, but something about her action went against the norm. And what was it about her action that went against the norm? It was the fact that she was a woman that was bleeding. And at that time, if you were menstruating or bleeding, having your cycle or menstruating, even though it had been going on for, a very long time, for 12 years for her, she should not have been out in public, right? She should not have been out in public. She certainly should not have been out in public in a crowd. So the first piece or part to the anatomy of bold action is it goes against the norm. And here's the thing, you and I have to make up in our mind, if we are going to be bold believers with bold thinking, rooted in bold prayers, taking bold action, we have to be okay with going against the norm. What is God challenging you to do in this season that is going against the norm? And the norm could be the norm in your family. The norm could be the norm in your friend group. It could be the norm in your church. What does the norm look like for you, right? And you all that are on Facebook, y'all tap, heart, love, and share with your followers and on my face and on my YouTubers. Y'all make sure you like and subscribe. So what made her action bold, the anatomy of that, is that it went against the norm. That's number one. So the question for you and I is, are you and I willing to go against the norm? Because some people are not comfortable, and I'm going to need about 5 more of y'all to share on Facebook. Yes, I was finding synonyms. I know that's right. Because most people, I'm not talking about any of you all, but most people are not willing to go against the norm. Most people only want to do what everybody else is doing. Thank you for sharing. Most people really only want to do what everybody else is doing, right? So it goes against the norm. That's number one. The second part to the anatomy of bold action. So again, the question is, what are you willing to do that's going against the norm? What are you willing to do that's going against the norm, right? What are you doing that is going against the norm? I'm a rebel. Come on, Yvette. And here's the thing, most people want you to do what's within the norm, right? Like what everybody else is doing. Most people want you to do what everybody else is doing. Most people want you to fit in a box. Most people want you to, and this is from people on your job, to people in your family, to people in your friend group and networks, want you to do what everybody else is doing. Because somehow we have associated assimilation, everybody doing the same thing, to being the way life should be. And that's just not true. And so when you buck up against the assimilation, it's problematic for people who have made up in their mind they're going to assimilate with all of life and not doing anything abnormal, not doing anything outside the lines, not color outside the lines. Listen, if we're going to see bold responses, bold results, we're going to take some bold action. And the question for you and I today is, what are you doing? What is God calling you to do? What's on your agenda to do that's outside the norm? Because bold believers who have bold things, who pray bold prayers, often take bold action that goes against the norm. And again, if on my Facebook Live, I'm going to need y'all tap, heart, love, and share out with your followers. Put somebody's name in the chat. But go ahead and share out with your followers, right? And so people want me to be comfortable with the norm because that could be their comfort place, and it wasn't. Yeah, absolutely, Beth. Absolutely. People want you to be comfortable in the norm, being comfortable, right? Because something about you not being in the norm rubs against them, and it really exposes the other person, but that's a whole nother conversation. Bold action, the anatomy of bold action, number one is that it goes against the norm. And again, if you're going to see some bold results, the question I have to ask for you is, are you willing to take bold action? Are you willing to do something, or are you doing anything that goes against the norm? Because that's going to be required. Bold action is going to require you to go against the norm. Okay? I'm using a marker to color. Come on, Yvette. Color way outside the lines. Absolutely. Number 2. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to need y'all tap, tap, heart, love. Thank you for sharing. Number 2. Bold believers with bold thinking rooted in bold prayers, taking bold action. Number 2. The concern about what other people will think and say is the least of the concern, right? So when you think about bold action, what other, thank you, Beth, putting names in the chat, what other people will say or do is of least concern, is of least concern, is of least concern. If we're going to be bold believers taking bold action rooted in bold prayers, what other people are thinking about that has to be the least of your concerns. And that's hard because we live in a society where we put a huge value on what people think about us and what people think. And again, this is not just about what people think about you. This is about what people are going to think about your bold action. This is about how are people going to feel about me taking this bold action. And I want to encourage you today. The anatomy of taking bold action requires you to not put a premium on what other people are going to think. You cannot have as a premium, as your number one valuation on this process, what is somebody else going to think. That can't be your litmus test. That can't be your valuation on this. Like, is this because what are people going to think? Listen, you have too much to do. God has too much for you. There's too much going on. The price is too big. The reward is too great. The return on your investment into being bold and taking bold action, the investment on that is too great. You cannot be consumed with what other people are going to think. You can't be consumed with what other people want to think. And that's hard because we put a premium on what other people want to think. If the woman had settled them out, okay, what are people going to think if I step out here like that? She may have never been healed. And there are people that you know, and maybe even for yourself, there are some things that we have missed out on because we were concerned about what other people want to think. There are some things that we have missed out on because we have been concerned about what other people are going to think. Because we put heavy concern on what other people are going to think about your bold action. You ain't got time. You don't have the kind of money to wasting it on. Well, what are they going to think? You got to just go for it. 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 Okay? The anatomy of bold action. We said, number 1, it goes against the norm. So bold action looks like you deciding to do something that everybody else is not doing. You got to decide, I'm going to do something that everybody else is not doing. That's bold action. Number 2, number 2, the anatomy of bold action, I am not centering the thoughts of other people. Write that in the chat. I will no longer center what other people have to think or say or their criticisms or judgment about what I got to get done, about what the bold action I have to take. You do not center the criticism of others. Do not center the criticism, judgment, or thoughts of others. And number 3, we're going to wrap it up here because it's almost 7 o'clock. And then we're going to finish on Wednesday. Excuse me. The anatomy of bold action. We're going to finish on Wednesday, the anatomy of bold action. I will no longer center what other people. Yeah, you can't center it. You might consider it, but you don't center it. You don't make it the central thing. You can't afford that. You can't afford that. You can't afford to, well, okay, well, how is everybody judging this situation? So I'm going to center their thoughts above my own. Are you kidding? You can't do that. You cannot do that. You cannot do that. And number three, and this we're going to stop here. We're going to wrap this up, and then we'll pick it up on Wednesday. Tomorrow morning we have our prayer call at 6:30 a.m. So join our prayer call tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. Join the prayer call tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. But number three, it's about the anatomy of bold action. We're talking about the anatomy of bold action. Number three is not only am I taking bold action, doing something outside the norm. Number two, the anatomy of bold action. I do not center what other people think or their criticism or judgments. I don't center that. I don't put a high valuation on that. And number three, and when we say high valuation of what other people think or criticism, we're not talking about the people that you're going to for wisdom and counsel. That's a separate set of voices, right? So I go to my banker when I want to understand banking and financial terms and industry, right? So I'm not talking about the people that we go to for wisdom. I'm talking about the people that are just on the fringe who have criticism and judgments. Those voices you can't pay attention to. I will no longer center what others think or say, their judgment or thoughts. Absolutely. Stacy, that's it. Absolutely. Can't center it. And number three, to the anatomy of bold action. I'm not centering Nook in them. That's exactly it, Beth. That's exactly it. Number three, to the anatomy of bold action. Number three, y'all ready for number three? The anatomy of bold action. It will stretch you. It will stretch you. We're talking about the anatomy of bold action. It will stretch you. If you're not stretched in the next step up, in the next bold action that you're taking, then that's not really a bold action. The way we will know it's a real bold action is that it will stretch you. Your mind gets stretched. Your knowledge gets stretched. Your skill set gets stretched. Something about you is stretched, meaning it's expanded. Like you're not the same. Like something about you is something about you is what's the word I'm looking for? It's stretched. It's grown. Something about you is bigger than where you were. Is is expanded. You will expand. I'm talking about the anatomy of bold action. Number three is that it'll stretch you. It'll stretch you beyond your comfort zone. It'll stretch you in ways you were maybe not even expecting. Something about you will grow. Something about you will expand. Something about you will become better, right? Your skill set. Bold action will stretch you. And here's another reason why people don't like to take bold action, because some folks don't want to be stretched. Some people don't want to learn anything new. Some people don't want to go beyond their comfort zone. Some people don't want to see new things, know new things, do new things, right? Some people don't want to be stretched. They're happy in the boxed in knowledge that they have, and they don't want any new concepts. They don't want any new skill sets. They don't want to be stretched. And so this morning, let's talk about the anatomy of bold action. You will be stretched. You will be stretched. You will not be the same person. So if you're trying to be the same person, or people around you want you to be the same person, I will not be the same person. Listen, I am not the same person since we launched Word of Encouragement Church. I am not the same person. I am not the same person since launching the business, since, doing all the things, right? You can't be. You can't be. Not if you're taking bold action, because it will stretch you. And again, it'll stretch your thinking, it'll stretch your skill set, it'll stretch your understanding. It'll stretch you. Bold action will stretch you. The woman had to stretch, and she had to reach past the crowd to get to Jesus. Something about her had to stretch. She had to reach for it. It just didn't happen. It just didn't come to her. She had to reach for it. She had to expand. She had to stretch out her arm, and she had to reach for it. The question for you and I today is, are you reaching for anything? Are you reaching for anything? I'm not judging you if you're not. We're talking about the anatomy of bold action. So either you are or you aren't taking bold action. That's not for me to judge. Not judging nobody, just asking questions that you can ask yourself. Am I being expanded? Is this growing me? Is this expanding me? Bold action will stretch you. Come on, Jules. I'm not the same person. Absolutely. And again, some people don't want to be stretched. They don't want to. They don't want their minds to expand. They don't want their network, their understanding to go anywhere. They want to stay in their box because they're comfortable. And there are people that need that. I know judgment. There are people that need everything to stay as it is and nothing to expand or grow. But I will say this. The good stuff. The big fish are in the deep waters where we have to be stretched. The big fish are in the deep waters where we have to be stretched. And so this morning we're talking about the anatomy of bold action. So we looked at the first 3 points, and we'll finish this Wednesday. Number one, bold action requires you to go outside the norm. Number one, the anatomy of bold action requires you to go outside the norm. Number two, the anatomy of bold action will require you to not center the thoughts and criticisms of other people. You can't center the thoughts and criticisms of other people and take bold action. Some voices you're going to have to tune out all the way. And some of those people look like family members and friends. They really do. And the third part to the anatomy of bold action, the third part is that you will have to be stretched. You will be stretched. Your thinking, your mind, your imagination, your physical, sometimes for some even physical ability will be stretched. Skill set will be stretched. Listen, you can't do social media and not be stretched. You have to. You'll learn camera. You'll learn lighting. People always like to show me your videos. Listen, I can't. My stretching, my taking bold action on social media required me to be stretched in the area of knowing how to do these phones and these apps and these cameras and this lighting. And you can tell all this shadow, I still ain't got the lighting perfect, but we getting there. You can see my face. That's the most important thing. We'll work on the shadow, right? But there are parts of me that are being stretched every time I go live, every time we do a social media post, right? And here's the thing that I want to remind you, for those that struggle in the area of being stretched, because some people fight being stretched. Some people fight being stretched, but the big fish are in the deep waters. The big fish. If people who like things to be real simple and easy, you're gonna catch a bunch of tadpoles in shallow waters. But the people that want to eat good, allow themselves to be stretched and go deep sea diving. Absolutely. The big fish are offshore. They off. They out in the middle of the ocean where you will definitely be stretched. All right? Okay, look, y'all, it's 7 o'clock. So we're wrapping this up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. Y'all have an amazing day. It is Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth. It is celebration of liberation today. So do something liberating. Do something in the area of liberation today. Do something in the area of liberation today, whether that is supporting a black business, and you can do that in person or online. You can go and do some active community service. There are unfortunately, homeless families all around us. You can go and serve a homeless family. You might see a family, that you may see regularly. Many of us have homeless neighbors that live near us, and we see sometimes the same people You can go and service them. Maybe take a meal, take some clothes, a blanket. It's a little chilly out. I don't know. Come on, boldly liberate yourself. Absolutely, Beth. Um, you know, or just spend time with family or friends. That's liberating. Really sit down with some people, your people. Have a conversation. Have a conversation with yourself or with somebody else. Like, how are you going to, you know, what are you going to do for yourself, right? How are you going to flow in the way of liberation, right? Maybe you need to have a conversation with a person of wisdom, as a counselor, an advisory person. Today's a good day for that. Like, hey, I'm planning this, I'm working on this. Today is a great day for me to have this conversation so I can put my plan together. Somebody maybe spend today, working on your strategy. How you gonna liberate your family from poverty? I don't know. So there's a lot of things you can do. Certainly, and read. Get a good book and read. Get something by a black author, Ta-Nehisi Coates. Who are some other people that I've been reading lately? Nedra Dawab. There's a bunch of authors out there. One of our own. Pick one of her books. Danica, I know she's not on, but Danica's got some books. Pick up a book by a black author, read. Another great book that I have read that I've always recommended is Sonia Renee Taylor, My Body is Not an Apology. So these are just some books you can read. So reading is a good, There's a Juneteenth celebration in Leimert Park for those of you that are in Los Angeles. There's a Juneteenth celebration happening today in Leimert Park, which I believe is probably going to be off the chain. So, all right, y'all, and happy Juneteenth. Do something towards liberation today. And I got my Black Fist Evolution t-shirt on. So I'll probably see some of y'all in Leimert Park today. I'm out, y'all. Have a great day. I'll see y'all Wednesday. Peace. We out, y'all. Be back tomorrow morning, 6:30 a.m. Peace.